I really don't want to make 2 videos in the span of a few minutes, so let's cover both of these topics in one video. This is me uniting the fan bases and making sure that everybody conforms to what I like. Just kidding, but I am a fan of both of these teams. I am a primary fan of one of them and a secondary fan of the other, so I wanted to talk about some trade rumors, some speculation details, and some things that I may have missed personally throughout the past few videos I've uploaded. Let's talk about Jake Virtanen and Jonathan Drouin, because both of these players are in a position where people are starting to say, hey, a trade might be in the works for either of them. Now, this is not online speculation. This is not me pulling things out of thin air. This is me talking about rumors that have been discussed on Sportsnet, on the radio, and by actual professional hockey people, not just the people that you see on Twitter spewing out their opinions because they think that they're right. Let's talk first off about Jonathan Drouin, because this is something that I kind of hinted at in my Canadiens trading a forward video from a few days ago, because Elliot Friedman in his 31 Thoughts specifically goes over Jonathan Drouin and how he's not been played all too much in the Habs preseason games, despite the Habs wanting to trade a forward. And the perspective brought up that I was talking about was either A, okay, that means Drouin is not going to be traded because if he's not getting played, then there's no reason to trade for him because they're not showcasing him, or B, he's not playing because he's playing against a weak Toronto Maple Leafs team. So either or, the perspective doesn't really give a definitive answer, but earlier, Eric Engels also reports on an Eastern Conference executive saying that Jonathan Drouin's name is out there in the trade market. This, of course, is from Spectre's Hockey. The 24-year-old Canadiens forward has had what Engels called 2 mostly disappointing seasons, and he hasn't looked good in the preseason. Now, because of this, and the way things are forming around Drouin, the idea is that Drouin's name is out there, and that's not something that people are new to. The idea of Drouin being traded has been talked about for months now, especially after he just disappeared in the most previous season of play. He was really, really good, and he was producing points, but there was a span of like a quarter of the entire year where he didn't score, and that in itself, compiled with the previous season of quote-unquote disappointing play, has led to people wanting to believe that Drouin can be traded. Which is why you're seeing these rumors from people online saying, oh, maybe Drouin and some other stuff for Laine, who knows? But for the most part, I didn't really entertain the idea of Drouin in my video a few days ago. I was talking more about the secondary guys because, hey, if Suzuki, Paling, and Evans are going to force their way onto this team, then the guys that they're going to be replacing should be other secondary scoring guys, right? Like Armia or Byron or some of these other guys, Charles Hudon, right? So I didn't really want to talk about Drouin, but I guess if we're going to talk about it here, let's do that, because Jonathan Drouin is in a weird spot. As I said, his preseason hasn't been amazing. He's not looked the best. Even in the game yesterday, I talked about it, how Drouin didn't really look all too dangerous out there. Now, he looked like he could have been dangerous, and he could have been a big offensive threat, but the fact of the matter is Drouin wasn't playing like a dangerous player. He had the potential to be that, but he wasn't that. Instead of making some really good shots on his own, he would always elect to pass it off to a safe, open bet, and as a result, the Leafs caught on, and they allowed him to do as he pleased, because they knew that he wasn't going to do the dangerous play. That in itself is quite concerning, but as a result, Drouin is a guy who's 24 and who's produced several 50-point years throughout his career. Now, baseline, that's awesome. That's great. 50 points in a year is awesome, but it's just the context around that, how he's on some nights and he disappears the other nights, and how he's inconsistent and how he's kind of weak when he's not great, that's really steering this discussion forward. Does Drouin make the Canadiens better? Hell yeah, he does. At least when he is good. When Drouin isn't on top of his game, nothing else really happens, which is why the Canadiens are entertaining this idea in the eyes of Eric Engels that they want to get somebody who can make a bigger impact longer. Now let's go on to the other player that we're going to talk about here today. Chris Johnston talks about Jake Virtanen. He says yesterday on Sportsnet 650 that he expects Virtanen to be traded for another player who needs a change of scenery at some point, but not in the next week or so. So let's just go out with it now. Virtanen is starting the year with the Canucks. That's what this is implying here. Now, we've talked about Jake Virtanen before. I brought him up in my video talking about how the Canucks and their own trading block includes Virtanen, Eriksson, Baertschi, Sutter, etc. Let's bring up Virtanen because he's been doing some things out there on the ice recently. Yesterday against the Ottawa Senators, I didn't really notice Virtanen all too much. I think he had one really good rush where he brought the puck in himself and got a shot on goal. But for the most part, Jake Virtanen is a guy who, honestly, probably could benefit from that change of scenery. This particular angle, I haven't talked about all too much. It's the angle of Virtanen not really having the discipline to stay motivated as an NHL athlete. This was brought up by Brian Burke on one of his segments on Sportsnet, talking about how Virtanen is only interested really in booze and girls. Now, that's not my own thing. That's what Brian Burke said, basically. And I didn't really want to talk about that all too much, but I guess since we're on the subject, I'll bring it up. Jake Virtanen, to me, is a player who has some great tools. Really, really great tools to be an effective player in this league, to be a 20, 25 goal scorer in this league. His stats of bringing the puck in cleanly are so positive that it's not even comparable to anybody else in the team, aside from maybe Quinn Hughes coming up later this year. Virtanen has such a great ability to bring the puck in. It's just that everything else after that is questionable. We don't know how good Virtanen is at setting up plays himself because he doesn't display that. He's got a pretty okay shot, but it only comes out once in a blue moon. The only really consistent thing with Virtanen is that he drives the play forward. It's just that after that, he passes it off to an open wing where nobody's there, or he takes a weak shot from far out that gets covered and saved by the goalie. Virtanen's hockey IQ isn't where it needs to be to justify giving him a spot in the top 6. And does he have top 6 potential? Hell yeah, he does. But the way things line up on the depth chart now, he's behind Brock Besser. He's behind JT Miller. He's behind Josh Levo. At best, in my opinion, Virtanen is on that 4th line spot. And you're not going to get anywhere if you're a young 22, 23-year-old guy with this talent playing on the 4th line. It's the old change of scenery argument. The guy needs a change of scenery to get his head in the right direction and to show him that he needs to go in a different path. Is that going to be beneficial for Virtanen if it happens? Yeah, I think it would be. I think it really would be. Virtanen is a guy who does have potential, and as a result, I do believe he could get a great return. It's just that I don't really know if there's really any teams who would be willing to bite unless they have another forward of their own that also needs a quote-unquote change of scenery. Cough, cough, Edmonton, Jesse Puljujarvi. But at the same time, I'm not in any realm suggesting that Drouin and Virtanen are in the same context here. They both have extremely different situations. They're both extraordinarily different players, and they're both on consistently different levels of skill. But Jake Virtanen is a guy to me who, he's got so much potential. Same with Drouin. They've both got some great talent. It's just that the way that they use that talent is different than how you would say would be the most effective. Which is why they're in this discussion. Jake Virtanen and Jonathan Drouin, 2 names here who are mentioned that could be on the trading block and who probably won't be on their respective teams by the time a few months later rolls around if everything goes the way the Sportsnet guys are saying it will. Where do they end up? I want you to tell me what's going to happen with these 2 players. How are their futures going to look like? Hope you enjoyed this video. and bye.